we're going to make a portfolio buy today. So I'm going to let you tee this one up, Austin. I'm not going to keep blathering.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Everybody wants to know what the Oracle of AI is buying next, and I'm going to keep repeating that until it sticks. Eric, I'll get you a plaque, shirts, whatever you want. So you're making two buys today, and I'm curious: are we doing any sells to fund these buys? What's the structure here and the impact on the portfolio?
Yeah, you keep saying this Oracle of AI. I'm like, is he talking about Warren Buffett? I don't know. We might need to work on this one. But no, we're not going to sell today. I will say, you've talked about how one of the reasons our performance as far as dollars doesn't match up to the recommendation, the average recommendation. One reason is because we had taken our cash and we had parked it in both Meta and Amazon, saying, hey, we would rather have this invested than in cash. Those stocks have actually dragged the portfolio down. I should have left in cash. It's even worse than cash drag. Total mistake. I do think that Meta right now has some unique angles on it. And, we'll talk about the release of Sora, but some real negativity cycle that could be approaching the stock. So I think I will be selling that stock, selling down some, which was always the intention, sooner than later. But these will be able to just finance with cash. And the first stock I'll talk about today, which is BE Semi or BESI, we will actually not be purchasing directly, and I'll explain why in a moment. But this is a stock that trades on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. It does have an OTC that's listed under BESIY. I wouldn't really recommend buying there because the volume is relatively limited. Its returns do slightly track above the underlying equity, but there's not a ton of liquidity there. So I think if you want to buy the stock, the best way to do it is to buy the international listing. Now, Austin, the headline for BESI is that it's only up 6% year to date, despite some really tight connections to trends that should accelerate in the years to come. One topic I just talked about a minute ago is high bandwidth memory. The innovation there is stacking memory chips, and you've got a low TSV that comes down and you connect it directly to the processor, the logic core. And this is how we're getting around some fundamental limitations in memory. Well, there's a lot
correct
of...
me if I'm wrong. This was one of the biggest breakthroughs that made Blackwell such a compelling product, right? Is the integration of high bandwidth memory or no?
Well, yeah, I mean, we will have had high bandwidth memory in other systems, but again, the bill for any of these cutting edge, systems is going to be a lot of high bandwidth memory. That's true of AMD systems as well. But Austin, the limits of semiconductors. So another area that we're looking at them is kind of how you get around some of these solutions where, for chips, one area to be able to make better chips was simply making larger dies. But, we're hitting limits on this. It makes the chips more expensive. It makes development more expensive. A solution to get around this, Austin, is to create chiplets. And you essentially allow smaller chips to work as a monolithic system. And the primary technology that's allowing this is something called hybrid bonding technology. And it's something BESI itself is an early innovator in, and I believe the technology leader. Now, who uses hybrid bonding? Well, Marvell uses it in its chiplets. It's reported that Broadcom, with their OpenAI custom accelerator that's coming out, will be using chiplets. But the most aggressive buyer of chiplets has been the company we just talked about getting this massive contract, AMD, right? And so the fact is, AMD, this hasn't been a stock that would have been something that was an accelerant since March 2024 until right before their announcement. AMD stock during that period when all the other AI stocks were going crazy, it was actually down 24% in that period. So what you have is BESI, even though they have this innovative technology, their primary customer is AMD, so their narrative's extremely poor. Well, what's changing, Austin? What you call micro bump pitch for hybrid bonding is about 5 times smaller than other bonding technologies. Well, to date in memory, for high bandwidth memory, it hasn't required this level of complexity, but that's starting to change in the second half of 2026 And by 2027, you should actually see a massive ramp, I believe, of this hybrid bonding technology going in for this massive push in high bandwidth memory that, once again, we've talked about how underestimated this has been and how much growth there could be. So, Austin, the bottom line here is that, number one, this company, just from their relationship with AMD alone, is probably going to see sales far above consensus. But then you see a second catalyst on the horizon, which is the fact that we're going to see a lot more use of its technology in high bandwidth memory. So, I believe I talked about last week, someone had asked a question of what are some trends you look for? And I said, I think knowing how architecture works before it sees revenue flow puts you at substantial advantage, because once the narrative begins on the increasing sales growth, a lot of people begin understanding that story and pile in. I think next year there's a lot of reasons. Second half of the year, AMD seeing this first gigawatt deployment. Second half of the year, their technology becomes applicable to HBM. So here's what I'll say about this. We're not going to add this to the portfolio. We're going to treat it like SK Hynix, where we track it as a recommendation, but we're not going to buy it, because I know it's difficult for a lot of people to buy international stock. So
Right.
I've talked with people, a lot of people have emailed us about buying SK Hynix. It's done wonderfully. I think it's about a double. So I want to get this information out to people. I think Bezi's a fascinating opportunity and a great stock. I personally own it. I will personally add it more. And if you're thinking of how we would put an allocation towards this in the portfolio, we would approach it like a $10,000 buy or 2% allocation, which is above some of the smaller speculative things we do, but not quite a core position. So that's how I would treat this stock if someone's adding it to their portfolio.
Boy, I like this pick a lot. This is definitely a skate where the puck is going. Looking ahead to the gigawatt buildouts and the fact that AMD is maybe now, flush with cash and looking to go big, and the intersection of them being the primary customer and flush with money, flush with the ambition, and the combining that with like the direction of high bandwidth memory here. So really love the narrative, love the convergence, love looking ahead here, which is it can be challenging to do in a space where everybody's just doing more and more and more. And you think that the investments that will make the most sense as these data centers get bigger and bigger are the ones that have already grown in this first wave. So I really like trying to find something that actually is well positioned for the next wave that might not have been as relevant in the first. Really, really good research there for our listeners.
And it's nice to get some stocks in your portfolio that aren't up, right, 200% in the past. We've got one next that's up 200% recently, but it does provide some de-risking that you're not getting something that's seen that high of level of returns recently.
Right, great digging there, Eric. I love this one. I'm sure you turned over a lot of stones to locate that one. The next one has been a great performer, and I think the implication that this, or the role that this plays in the data center, will be obvious when we say the name of this, right? Which is Power Solution International. This company helps deliver the power, that makes all this industry possible. And when you distill all of this down at a fundamental level, and you sort of go all the way down, you get to a point of realizing what are we really trying to accomplish with AI, and it's how effectively can you deliver and harness power and compute, right? That's what all of this is. More powerful chips and more powerful data centers and cooling. It is all about aggregating electrons and directing them towards a goal. So, what role does Power Solution International play in the stack here?
Yeah, and we've talked about this stock before, so there might be people listening who had already bought it. Eric Jonesa, who we had interviewed, I believe 2 or 3 podcasts ago, he highlighted this as a stock to be interested in. Where we first highlighted it was our YOLO episode on August 1st. Everything from that episode's done really good. AAOI, which we featured there, is up 51% since. Applied Digital from the Neo Clouds is up 123%. Ouster's up 45%. Power Solutions is the one that's been lagging this group. So, I know it's a little counterintuitive for listeners out there, but you talk about stocks with similar characteristics and ones behind the group, it often makes you more interested in that company from today. So I'll explain why it's been trailing the group shortly, but we wanted to be opportunistic because the stock had fallen into the low 80s. Uh, as is classic, it's kind of rallied the past few days, so it's back into the mid 90s, but I think it's still a good deal here. Personally, I'd first purchased the stock on March 25th of this year for a cost basis of 31.05. So, you can see some of the recent gains that have happened from it, but the pitch is pretty simple. It's effectively that the market that this company operates in has fantastic long-term demand dynamics. They're off the chart. And this company is not that expensive, I think in large part because it is so small and under followed. So, Austin,
I mean,
Power
just
Solutions.
let me let me
Sure.
put that into context. This company is up over 300% in the last year, and it is still a $2 billion company. So that is
Yeah.
the size of what we're talking about after a 300% ralley. Boy, thank you for
Yeah.
the March 25th text telling me to buy this. Just kidding. Where I would come on. You got to share those with the crew here, man. I would love to have
All
had that
right. All
$1 billion
right.
cost basis.
All
But
right.
keep going, keep going.
We'll get more yellows flowing, but no, Austin, I think at the end of the day, they've got several segments and they've got infrastructure, they've got transportation equipment, but what we care about is the power systems, right? That's what we've been talking about in many podcasts. And there's specifically a lot of demand for generators that can allow data centers to be not entirely dependent on the grid, with demand for power exceeding our ability to supply it for years to come. That creates a ton of demand for their products. So we look at the sales acceleration. It's pretty remarkable. 9% 4 quarters ago to 38% growth to 42% growth to 74%. So that's gotten them to a point where last quarter their run rate was at about 130 million in operating profit. They're valued at $2.2 billion total as of our filming, a trailing P of 19. That would be reasonable, Austin, if we were at a peak, right? Everyone's always looking. Some memory was cheap at the end of the year. We said, well, it's cheap because a lot of people think we're at the peak of the cycle. We actually think the cycle is going to stretch a lot longer. And that's our non-consensus viewpoint, why we think there's a lot of opportunity. We've been proven right so far. I believe the same thing. They've got a lot more growth than anyone expects. I think they have a single Wall Street analyst even covering them who's projecting 20% growth next year. I don't think they're going to decelerate that fast. And it's because this data center demand continues to be dramatically higher than supply. You look at generators as a whole, every megawatt, they get about $800 million in business. We talked earlier about OpenAI's, 26 gigawatt ambitions. So the inflection point of, where they're going to be able to keep growing, I think only gets more steep in the next few years. Now, Austin, why are they trailing some of the other competitors? Well, we talked about the other stocks from YOLO being up a lot. Well, they're kind of down. It's because they had a former majority owner who's been selling off their shares in the company, which is kind of, the price of a stock is supply and demand. And it's created a lot of selling pressure on it. So I don't think it's been anything operating. It's been an external factor of that owner dumping shares into the market. So I'm using this as an opportunity. We're going to add $5,000. Again, it's small. It's speculative for that reason. I don't know if they have any particular advantage over rivals, but they are cheap as they're valued, and their product has such insatiable demand, the industry should be constrained for years to come. So, also, I really like the opportunity for this to go over 100% returns in the coming years, right? I think it's a excellent way to diversify your portfolio too, away from, if you've got chips and other things, be able to get something in this kind of power chain. So I think people who are listening to the show should definitely consider adding this one.